All right, script. Here we go. So October 25th, 2021, special meeting, confirming member access. As a preliminary matter, this is I am Brian Colleran, Chair of the Newbury Conservation Commission. Permit me to confirm that all members are present and can hear me. Conservation Commission members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Ben Gehagen.
Yes.
Brad Duffin.
Yes.
Dan Streeter.
Yes.
Frank Weddingkamp. No. Mary Rimmer. No. Peter Pecos. Not coming. Okay, town staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Samantha Holt.
Yes.
All right, great. Everybody's got good audio. So good evening. This October 25th, 2021 open meeting of the Newbury Conservation Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with the act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, which extends the governor's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law until April 1st, 2022. This order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location and allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberation of the meeting. Please note this meeting is being recorded and that attendees are participating by video and/or telephone conference, and the recording will be available on the Newbury Access YouTube channel. Before we turn to the topic of the agenda, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I, as chair, will introduce each item on the agenda for all attendees except commission members and staff. Please remember to mute your computer or your phone when you're not speaking. Please use earbuds or cell phones with cell phones or tablets. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. Please be aware that video participants can see you and that you should take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. If commission members wish to engage in discussion with other members, please do so through me, taking care to identify yourself when you wish to speak. Regarding public comment, there will be an opportunity for public comment and questions at the end of the meeting. After commission discussion, we will afford the public an opportunity to comment and/or question as follows. Samantha will seek questions and comments through the Zoom's raise hand function. Video conference participants, to raise your hand, hover over the bottom of the Zoom window below the photo gallery and click on the yellow hand that appears. If you don't see a yellow hand, click on the participants button. A list of participants will open and display on the right. At the bottom of this participant area, you will see an option to click on the raise hand button. Please ensure your name is fully and correctly displayed on the participant list. Telephone participants raise hand using the *9 on your phone's keypad. We will then allow questions and comments from members of the public who have raised their hands in the order of which they're listed, which is determined by the order in which people click on the raise hand function. Each participant will be called on to provide their names and then ask a question or make a comment. Please note that the chat feature is not part of the official record and should not be utilized during the meeting. Anyone wishing to address the commission must do so through their video or audio connection. The chat feature is intended only for the use of the commission and its agent and only for the purpose of communicating with individuals in the event of a disruption. Please also note that everyone is expected to conduct themselves in the same manner they would at an in-person meeting. Any disruption will result in removal to the waiting room where you will receive a direct chat message from Samantha. Once acknowledged, Samantha will readmit you to the meeting. Any further disruption will result in complete removal from the meeting with no readmittance. Finally, the only vote, each and every vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. Great, there's the script. Anybody show up while I was talking? No, okay. So, Ben, why don't you give these guys and then Dave and Jack a quick summary of, how we got here.
Absolutely, happy to do it. So this has been, I'm trying to think about the first time I probably brought this up to Doug Packer. It's probably over 2 years ago. But I'd say it really gained steam after Doug left and we settled into a virtual world where we had our footing on everything and were able to think about things and get back. Bill Holt had been hired and we were resuming regular functions. We had been talking about it prior and then Doug kind of said, I'm out of here, I'm retiring now. So that stalled us and then we had Bill and we got everything going. So we went down this path and it grew out of, I think, almost every commission member at the time had some level of concern with the way one thing or another was working. And there was enough there that when you combined all our concerns, it seemed like a good path forward was to work towards having a bylaw for inland resources. This wasn't really focused on Plum Island. Obviously, that's a very regulated area already. We were more interested and concerned about things that were happening not on the barrier beach. And I think that was, I'm kind of throwing a little bit of spaghetti. I don't want to speak for other people here, but at least for me, I've only been here 10 years, but it seemed like increasingly the available lots aren't there. So the building that is occurring in town is near resource areas and wetter areas, less ideal areas, and the whole town's pretty wet anyways. And we're having, as Boston is increasingly a destination and the economy is staying strong, we're having more and more people who want to live within commuting distance of Boston, people moving out of Boston, everything else. So, the demographic trends are towards expanding population. And so with that in mind, we had a meeting. And when I say we had a meeting, I want to be clear that everything, I along with everybody else, would lament the way that things get noticed in town. And I wish that there was more outreach on the behalf of that the town was doing more outreach about what happens with town commissions and committees and staff to citizens. I've made that point to the people who should be doing that, and I will continue to make that point. But we had properly noticed hearings about all this stuff, and that was the way we were told we had to do it. When Doug and I first talked about this, we were envisioning having putting out calls for a real working group of citizens and commission members. We were told we could not do that it had to kind of follow this formula of the commission having meetings with public input. So we had a section of a commission meeting in which we all talked about our concerns. It became clear at that commission meeting that probably the best way to move forward was to have 2 or 3 commission members who shared everybody's concerns, and we could hear the concerns of the entire commission to move forward with drafting a bylaw amendment. And as we made progress, we would regularly check in with the commission. And again, all these subcommittee meetings were properly noticed so people could come and listen and ask questions, although I don't think anybody ever did for the subcommittee. Every once in a while, somebody would ask a question in the main commission meeting. So that the commission appointed Brian, myself, and Mary Rimmer to be that subcommittee. And so we would work once or twice a month on it over the winter. And then, once a month come back to the commission. This is approximate timeframes to get feedback on what was happening. And we'd work on it a little bit in a full commission meeting if we had time. So in doing that, that's kind of how we got to where we were. And the main, Sam, am I allowed to share my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted
The only thing you're allowed to do is bring up anything new.
Okay. Yep, I don't think I'm not doing this to bring up anything new. I'm doing this to, there we are, my friend. Okay, yeah, that's what I want. All right, so hopefully now everybody is seeing the draft bylaw. And so, I mean, when I say, and we can get in, I don't want to linger on this too much right now. I'm just trying to do the timeline, but this is really at the top is the real focus of why we decided to do this, which is the purpose of the Wetlands Protection Act. So these are the main 8 purposes of the State Wetlands Protection Act. And then you have the special purpose of this wetlands bylaw. So within coastal areas, we added in these 3 measures. The ACEC, because that's in the coastal area, to protect coastal resiliency from sea level rise, and to protect and preserve the ecological function of all coastal wetland resources. Those were kind of the 3 things that we thought could be helpful to, in the future, have regulations in the coastal area. And I want this to be specific. This is about the coastal area, not specifically. So that's all the salt marsh habitat in town, of which we have tons. It's not really centered on the barrier beach habitat. This isn't about barrier beach habitat. This is about the coastal area. And then within inland areas, this is where we really had more. So to protect the ability of wetlands to mitigate effects of climate change by acting as carbon sinks, protect rare species habitat, including rare plant and animal species, including those not yet mapped by the Heritage and Endangered Species Program, because as we're seeing right now, The timeline of communication and getting things certified is almost always going to be a mismatch in our permitting. Protect vernal pool habitat, including those not yet mapped by heritage and environmental species or endangered species, and to protect and preserve the ecological function of all inland wetland resources. And this wording is where we got, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong here, but this wording I've highlighted is really where we got to give us some leeway to craft responsible but not crazy regulations about buffer areas. So
Yeah, I mean, more or less, right? The idea is that the law doesn't really include ecology, and we all wanted room to sort of acknowledge the natural world that we're actually regulating, as opposed to just going by the book and by the law. We wanted sensibility, built into that from that perspective. So yeah, it was just sort of an open end. We'd like to acknowledge that there is nature here, and they may not abide by, they may not be able to read.
well, I'm gonna try and stick to the timeline here, and we'll come back to this. I think this is where we should spend the meat of the conversation, Brad.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So but just sticking to the timeline. So we did all this work over 3 or 4 months. We did this draft amendment. We did the draft bylaw. We felt happy with it. We hadn't, we noticed everything. We hadn't really had a lot of public participation despite noticing everything. And then I don't know exactly why, but we were basically trying to get it so we could get it onto the spring warrant. We had one last meeting where the only thing on the agenda was this. And at that point, we had a bunch of people show up, mainly from the Plum Island. They were very upset about this. And they were pointing out areas where maybe they thought that this would affect them. And that wasn't our intent, but we saw the validity in some of the concerns. And so we said, we obviously need to do more process here. And we pulled back from doing anything. Very purposely decided this isn't ready. We need to figure more stuff out. Let's keep working on this and shoot for the fall or next spring. And then the whole voting thing happened. And this is the first time we're picking it up. So I think, sorry, one last thing, two last things I would say, Brad, is that the current regulations regarding the barrier beach, regarding Plum Island, we have been told by town council in numerous meetings that those are basically moot. Like, they are not something that they're negotiated settlement language, legal settlement language with the state, and we should not be touching it. So we have not.
Got it.
And then the second thing I would say is that what's in here, obviously you want to do something that has an actual purpose if we're going to do it, bother having a bylaw amendment. But there's nothing in here that I think anybody is so wedded to that they would say, if we're not going to have that in here, then it's not worth doing anymore. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, we're here to get input. We're here to talk and help people. We're trying to make something we think is going to be meaningful without getting in people's way. But we need to get that input and understand people's needs and help. And there may be some education, there may be some listening too. So that's where we stand, and I will stop sharing my screen.
So just a question, Brian, if I could, to Ben, is could you share the track changes from what the original Chapter 95 bylaw for Newbury is versus what you're going through now? I take it those were your blue highlighted items on there?
Yeah, Sam, is the track changes version still on the website or no?
We were having a debate earlier.
I believe the only copy that's on the website is the clean copy that is clearly marked that it is a draft.
Correct.
The version that has the track changes, I believe I thought it was in the Dropbox.
So I think, number one, I'd like to see a copy, Ben, the one that you just showed. And I also think that that should be in the public website so that we can eliminate some of the questions that are going to come from the public about what is the difference between the current bylaw and the proposed changes, right?
Yeah, I agree. I'm in the Dropbox right now. So what I was showing you before was in the was what was on the website, which
It
is
was.
just that. Yes,
Okay,
that
good,
was that.
good.
That was that. It looks like Sam. Okay, yeah. So here is, yeah. Okay, so here's the strike through, which is a lot. I can share it right now if you'd like, Brad.
I just, if you could email me a copy of that, that would be great. Or if just, I think there should be something that the public gets to see that shows maybe it's not always good to watch the sausage being made, but it certainly is good for the public to understand why the sausage is being made. And then we will get a lot smarter questions if we show that, if the more transparent we are as to how that sausage was made before they take a bite of the sausage. Just my 2 cents.
No, I think that that's fantastic advice. And I think, Mary, and I think that one of the things that I don't know, I can't remember if I saw a draft that you did, and welcome.
Thanks. That was the track changes was what I had put together.
Yeah, I thought that at some point, I know we talked about it. I can't remember if either of us started writing it, about putting out an informational document explaining the intent and why we're
almost an executive summary.
Yeah, of
right?
like why, and yeah, of just trying to explain of like, this is why we're bothering to make sausage in the first place.
Right.
I know Mary and I just talked about it, but I don't know if we ever got around to doing anything.
I did draft something. Yep.
Yep.
Didn't get beyond a draft between you and I think though.
Yeah, I think that you drafted it and I did some edits. So Sam, that means that Mary and I are going to find that and fix it up and make you put it up. Thanks for the reminder.
And tomorrow I can put up the version of the draft that has the track changes, so you can see, where things have changed.
Great.
Yeah, and
That's
Sam, I think there's another idea that Brad just had, where if you can get all of the recordings of those working groups that we did, like, I don't know where they file them in town, if they end up in like in a giant pile of YouTube videos that are hard to sort and sift through. But all of those working meetings we did last year,
and link them
if
to...
you can select them and post them on like a sub web page, then all of those conversations, right? If you want to know why a certain item was done, you can actually sit and watch all those conversations again. And that might be simpler than, sifting through the town's YouTube site.
Clearly.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of them, but I know off the top of my head, I can think of at least 2 or 3 that that I know are up there that I can dig out. I can get the links to them and put it on that website as well.
Yeah, and then like if Brad wants to like dig into something and be like, oh, why, it's all there. If somebody from the general public wants to dig in, it's all there, and it's all in the same spot, because to what Ben said, the more input we get, the better it's going to turn out at the end.
Absolutely.
So,
no, Ben, you did a great job summarizing that, and it based on our earlier conversation, I think of last week, via text messages and emails, I think that it's perfectly crystal clear now compared to what it was when the document first came out.
Yep. No,
and I think that some of those points that I raised with you last week were probably some of the same points that some of the members of the public were raising, because they may not have been aware of the restrictive nature of the agreement between the state and the town of Newbury and the town of Newburyport over bringing water and sewer to Plum Island.
Yeah, and I feel like it's just town. I think that our current, if I'm remembering correctly, our current town council was representing Newburyport in those negotiations at that time, or was somehow involved, is what she might have told me.
Lisa was
Um,
involved in it, but it should be, she would be the one to point out that the town changed the bylaw that was originally, the
Proposed.
town refused to do it. And initially, DEP said, here you go, this is the bylaw we want. And then I think my recollection was the town said, actually, no, we're gonna write our own. And it went in, it wasn't directly a requirement of there was another iteration. I'm not saying this right, but I think that what happened was there was one iteration that was approved by DEP as part of the water and sewer project. And then there was another bylaw passed that was different. Is that something like that, Dan? You might remember what happened back then.
I don't really
Actually,
recall.
hold on, can I
but,
just interrupt here for a second? Let me,
Lisa was correcting me
before we go
on
on.
my interpretation that it was a direct result of the decision, DEP's adjudicatory decision on.
I think that then at the end of the day,
Hold on a second, because in theory, there's gonna be people watching this who have no idea what we're talking about. Could someone just start from the beginning and say what it is we're talking about? Because it's all being implied, and we all know, but a viewer may not. And
I
to
don't
Brad's
know.
point, yeah. Mary or Ben or Dan, anybody want to volunteer for just like a quick summary for the viewers who haven't seen, who don't know the story yet? I could do it, but just want to.
As part of the water and sewer improvements that were conducted on Plum Island. Because there was an executive order from Governor King that back in the 1980s that prohibited development on Barrier Beach, the DEP required that there be a bylaw passed that would protect wetland resources so that the extension of water and sewer did not result in a direct increase in development that would alter resources on the Barrier Beach. And I'm probably butchering that because I'm going by memory, and I'm sure that others may be listening on this might have a better explanation, but it dated back to the original water and sewer project, which required a bylaw, which the town did do. I'm just not sure if the bylaw that we have now is the exact same one that dated back to that original DEP decision.
yeah, I'm unsure of that too, Mary, and I wasn't here then, but that's what I've been led to believe. But what we were told by legal counsel was that basically thou shalt not touch.
Yep.
Right. And so the bylaw, as it applies to Plum Island, we have taken a very hands-off approach to, because we're trying not to interact with that aspect of the law, even to the point of correcting typos being something we were advised not to do. And so anything that would interact with the island would arguably, be counterproductive to getting a bylaw put together that wouldn't somehow be challenged by some higher authority.
Yeah. And so the focus of the amendment for people not here and will come watch us is that of our current bylaw amendment process is to be dealing with salt marsh habitat that's not on the Barrier Beach and inland, and by inland we mean freshwater wetland resources.
So when you were crafting that last sub-bullet of the special purposes of the wetlands bylaw, would you include pollution in that as an effect to the protection of wildlife habitat?
Let me, are you talking, I just wanted, so we make sure we're talking
The one
about,
we're going back to in blue.
yeah, now I'm on this one, of course. Special purposes of,
Of course you are.
I think you're talking about the,
Promote, no, you had another one down there. In fact, Brian, I think you said we'd come back to
There's
that.
number 4 is the one is that what you're referring to in that screen? Oh, you just missed it because
No.
there was something about.
No, I'm just gonna go to the version he was working off of.
Yeah, there you go.
You want number 9 here?
That's it. To protect and preserve the ecological function of all coastal wetland resources. That's the new kicker, right, Brian?
How do you mean
That's-
kicker? Because it
Well,
is a
I'm
new
saying,
thing.
I'm saying that's one that you said would give you, no, I'm sorry, maybe it's number 14,
Yeah, they're
which is,
really the
which
same.
is the
Brad.
same,
Yeah, they're the same.
Right.
which is one and the same.
Yeah.
Coastal and
Yeah.
inland term.
Yeah, the one would be for the salt marsh, and then, to replicate and be consistent, the one then is for inland.
Correct. So when we talk about all inland wetland resources, that potentially could include wetland resources that either start or end or go through Plum Island, correct? The way,
No,
the way
not
the
really.
water
No.
flows?
No.
No,
And that isn't the
Brian.
intention.
I know
No,
it's not the intention, I'm just asking.
no, because everything on Plum Island would be considered a coastal resource because it's on the barrier beach, which is a coastal resource itself. So this would be not specifically not relating to Plum Island.
Where is that break line between the inland wetland resource and the Plum Island resource physically on a map?
At the bridge, I would assume.
Okay, so water does flow either through the Parker or through the Merrimack River underneath the bridge, correct?
Correct. Yep.
So would that Article 14 cause, by it being adopted as written, not new, just a question, would it cause the contributors to pollution into those ecological, into those inland wetland resources? Would they be subject to these bylaws?
Okay, so there's
They
a
already are.
distinction between the Plum Island political boundary and the coastal scientific boundary. Okay, so
Yeah, I get it.
so yeah, and I understand your question when maybe we can have some clarifying language, because the intention is that the Plum Island River, the Parker River is tidal and therefore coastal river through Newbury, most of it anyway. There's portions of it very far in Byfield that wouldn't be considered, but we're talking about focusing on the intersection between Plum Island and the mainland. And there are still salt marshes on the mainland side that are coastal wetland resources that are not on Plum Island.
So
So-
you're making my point for me, Mary.
Yep.
I think that number 14 is going to be, I know you put that in there, or I believe you put that in there to give you a broader brush by which this bylaw amendment can paint with, but I do believe that it's going to cause you some consternation with enforcement, as well as an opportunity to be challenged.
Well, all of those areas are currently regulated already by the wetland
And
protection.
14 doesn't, I mean, I think 9 would be the problem, Brad. If you think it's just about, do you think
I
it's
think it's both.
everywhere?
I think
Okay.
it's both, because
Is
as Mary said, there's areas by which the Parker goes up into, is tidal, but it also goes into Byfield. I do know areas in Byfield where it's still tidal.
Yeah,
So-
no, okay, yeah, like, there's a very hard line where the Parker becomes inland resource, and it's basically Central Street.
Mhm.
Like, that's the line. Downstream of Central Street, it's tidal, and upstream it is not. That's the line. I mean, you're talking about a coastal resource in the marshes surrounding the Parker River downstream of Central Street, and an inland resource upstream. I think it's a clear line between I think inland is inland and coastal is coastal. I mean, if the language is too broad on 0.9 for the Plum Island community, I could understand that. I'm just trying to clarify what your real,
Yeah.
do you think that it's too broad town-wide for any inland
Agreed.
resource?
Agreed.
You think the latter?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Okay, so, so that's, you know, that's a essential part of this bylaw is the idea of providing a bylaw that incorporates the entire town, not just Plum Island, and recognizing that the entire town, not including Plum Island, includes coastal and inland wetlands.
No, I think that what Brad's saying is that the protect and preserve ecological function language is the issue. So I don't think it's about the two
Correct.
jurisdictions.
Oh,
It's
okay.
just about
Just
that.
that
But
performance
like, and
standard.
Brad, now we're
Correct.
flirting with the intent and what we want to execute in this meeting.
Okay,
So I think that
Mhm.
Sam, if you can just note bullets 9 and 14 could be revised and we can leave it there. Does that sound
Right.
good, Brad?
Yeah, it does, Ben. Thank you.
Okay, great. I got to get you to
Okay,
your
thanks,
dinner
I-
date, man.
thanks
Um,
for
Not-
explaining
Not
that
worth
one.
angry wives.
25 minutes and counting. I'm good. You answered all my questions.
That was it.
That was it.
You, man. Now I want to go on the date. You're an easy one.
So, in that case, Sam, is there anything on your mind about this that you've got questions about, like how the sausage fell out? If 9 and 14 are, covered, anything else that you wondered about?
I think, and I know this is, it's something that Steve Mangan had mentioned as well in his emails. He specified one particular thing that he wanted, or that he thinks could use some definitions, but I think including some definitions on, how in the rest of the bylaw, it defines development, new development, redevelopment, things like that. And, I was looking at, for instance, the stormwater bylaw today, and they have a lengthy list of words as they're defined. And I think that could be something that could be really beneficial. That was one of the big concerns that I had. I studied this pretty extensively during my master's course. I did a lot, my entire master's course, my culminating experience of it for my capstone was doing a coastal management plan for the town. So I studied the bylaw pretty heavily, and, not having a ton of experience with coastal work, there were a few things here and there that I was like, hey, what does that mean? I don't understand that. So I was going for my master's degree in resource management. So you could see how, the average Joe homeowner doing work, looking at the bylaw saying, am I even going to be able to do this? Could run into some issues.
No, I think you bring up
Yeah.
a good point, Sam.
I'm sorry?
I said, I think you bring up a good point about definitions.
Yeah. I think, just from a very baseline perspective of, your average homeowner, I think it could be something that could be really beneficial. That was one of the big things that kind of stuck out to me, was that, especially in the interest of things like transparency and making it easier for people to, do work in town, to do these applications, to learn something from them. I think providing the definitions could be really useful, and I think a lot of people would.
I think it also might make our job a little bit easier.
Right.
So we wouldn't have to go through some of these lengthy applications. It's either yay or nay real
Yeah.
quick.
And and could definitely help to speed things up a little bit if people can come in knowing what these individual things are, and knowing how the town defines them.
So Sam, there's one hang up, with the idea in that, the bylaw definitions that are already existing were put there as part of the agreement. And if we were to say redefine development, and we had two different, definitions for development, one that applied to the island and one that applied to the rest of the town, if we set up two parallel laws, essentially,
Right.
that might be harder.
So I'm not necessarily saying like to redefine things like that, but more
Explain them in layman's terms.
right. And I think, and Steve, if feel free to jump in if I'm remembering the wrong word. I believe it was the carbon sinks that
No, he said to define inland resource areas, and
inland resource
I
areas.
am gonna say, like, I would stress that the purpose of this meeting, as we posted it, was to not
Right.
do what we're
Sorry.
very much about to do.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that we
We don't
should
want to go down that road.
probably not do it.
Right.
Um,
And
And I
that,
vote.
so in the
And
interest
for
of staying
president.
on topic with that, just to kind of have that, I can make a note of it and,
Make a
have
note.
that included in later discussion to, make some determinations on what might need defining and what can be
Well,
defined.
Sam, I think let me take that bridge that you just built. And so, we've gone over what technically got us to the law, but it might be useful to, Brad, Frank, yourself, whoever's listening, to know sort of what was on our mind. Like, my motivation, particularly for this law, had a lot to do with what Brad just said, where, we've answered the same question 30 times in the last 2 years. We can put the answer in a regulation. We don't need to have that answer. So Sam could actually say, sorry, you didn't meet the grade. We know the answer to this question. And we can regulate that. But we actually can't do that kind of thing right now because the bylaw isn't built to allow that. And so a lot of my motivation for encouraging this inland wetland law is to say, we have these answers. We don't need to have you guys coming in all the time. There was a project that came in off of the traffic circle where we said, do a thing, and then they came back with it basically not done. The agent was in a position to say, you didn't do the job, I'm not gonna put you back on the agenda, but we didn't have anything saying that could happen. And so to give that kind of clarity and hopefully, get the work done behind the scenes rather than constantly rehashing the same stuff over and over. That was a big part of my motivation. So whatever that's
Brian, one question, and I just want to clarify for the audience as well as for the record. So you were just talking about the definitions and the having two sets of definitions, one for inland, one for coastal. The intent of this was not to make the inland bylaw as restrictive as the Plum Island bylaws, is it?
No, that wasn't the way we were framing it. The restrictiveness, we were trying to be functional rather than political. I don't know how to frame that.
Yep, got that.
The
So
Plum Island
it's
bylaw,
looking at a problem that we have, and just trying to solve the problem we have.
right, just to clarify that the reason that the Plum Island bylaw is stricter is it's dealing specifically with development and construction issues that are relevant to Plum Island, meaning if your development exceeds certain thresholds, it needs to go up on piles. And that's a lot of what the bylaw deals with. That doesn't apply to inland conditions. We're not going to be having a 50% rule or anything like that under the inland wetland. There's no requirement to do that. There's no need to do that in other scenarios. So there's
That's
a lot of
important, Mary.
definitions that have to do with construction and development and what is redevelopment and those kind of things that don't necessarily apply in the inland wetland.
That's helpful.
regulations. Yep.
Thanks, Mary.
Yeah, I mean, and so to be specific, we talked about the purposes that allow us to do regulations, but really, if you were to say, if these are the three things that we added here, Brad, to the bylaw that would give us jurisdiction in areas we currently do not have jurisdiction. And Mary, if I
Right,
switch-
which would be restrictive in one way of framing. You could say we are restricting these spaces more.
Yeah. we had some jurisdiction, but we're increasing our ability to say things about them in a hearing. Is that a fair way to say it, Mary?
We're increasing our jurisdiction, but what was the second part?
I was saying we had some level of ability to look at these resources, but we're increasing our ability to basically tell people who are developing property that you need to give them more of a buffer. You need to these resources are going to have more protection now.
Yeah, I
And-
think the idea is to give performance standards as part of this.
Yeah.
For what you can and can't do.
And
So
these are more
in wetland
restricted.
conditions. Mostly
and
it
these-
has to do with the setback requirements and which kind of projects would be appropriate for setbacks.
Okay, sorry,
And-
Brad, what was your question?
Yeah, no, and you say there, right there, that they're more specific and more stringent than set forth in the state WPA. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, I read that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean so when you talk about what were you trying to do to your question is, we're trying to make it as restrictive as it? No, we're not. We're just trying to say, we think that these increasingly, as we've been doing this, these three areas need more protection than they get in our town now than the state has provided in the past. And some of the
Roger that.
protections are super vague. Some of
Yep.
it's like you've probably seen it already, where
Yep.
a consultant comes in and says, we think it means this, and we say, well, the WPA is pretty vague on this. We're going to say it means this.
We
So-
have a couple of those in front of us now.
Yep. So again, it's getting back to channeling towards what Brian was saying as well, where if we can say ahead of time, this is what we mean, then there's no arguments.
Right. And Brad, this is another good example to do a bylaw, to make this bylaw happen at all. You can't just copy paste the state law. You actually have to make the law more restrictive than what the state
Correct.
does already.
I
So
understand.
technically, we do have to add one level of restriction. And, to the risk of repeating what Ben said, we have muddy waters on these three areas already.
Mhm.
And so this arguably is just going to add clarity and simplicity, even though, sure, it'd be more restrictive, but it would be simpler and clearer, and we'd have shorter conversations, and we could just do yes, no answers, hopefully.
Right. And like we said earlier, these could be vetted by Sam as conservation agent prior to them having a full application accepted and meeting with us.
Right.
If
and
then,
like the vernal
if then,
pool habitat, yeah. And you saw how vernal pool habitat goes, in terms of the state and that muddiness. So we could deal with that. The isolated vegetated wetlands, the number is basically whatever we feel like. There are towns that go low, like 1,000 square feet, and there are towns that, go much higher and say 3,000, 3,500 is being the trigger for review. The ACEC, you picked up on that with the dock project. It
Mhm.
is already a regulated area. It's just hopefully, taking this out of that sort of hard to work with space and just saying, we can take care of this, we can help, we can be clear.
Well,
So-
it takes personal agendas out of this and makes it clear. It's if then, right?
Ideally.
Ideally, indeed. Yeah. Yeah, and so, yeah, I mean, I think that my big concern, Brian kind of talked about what his concern, my big concern was buffer areas, and we were just seeing projects more and more. I felt that where 75 or 80% of the project is in the buffer area. And while the buffer area is not a protected resource, if 80% of your project is in the buffer area, then what is it? It's not you're affecting the resource area, I guess, at that point. And I wanted to deal with the vagueness of how WPA treats that.
Ben, that's why we did the ecological function thing, wasn't it?
But that's what I said, and then you said, no, that's not why we did the ecological function. Remember? I said we did that.
I totally misheard you. My bad. That was,
Yeah.
During your deliberations on this, Mary, Ben, and Brian, did you take a map of the town and see what areas would be affected by these proposed bylaw changes?
We don't have mapping that is detailed enough to know it precisely because DEP has wetland maps that, yep, that Ben's gonna load up right now, and we can look at where the DEP has mapped them, but they miss some because
Nope.
this is
That-
just
that-
in a photograph. So yeah, you can.
I'm not
You have-
trying to start new business. I'm not, trust me, I'm not. I'm just asking a question. Did you look at them? Yes or no?
Yeah, we've looked at maps.
Okay, good.
No.
And as I said, I mean, all of the North Shore is, every town up here is heavily wetland. I mean, it's very wet.
Yep,
There's a lot of wetlands.
a lot of water.
Yep.
But I think that it doesn't add, it adds very little in terms of acreage of new areas protected that aren't already jurisdictional, that people don't already have to come to us for a permit for.
Got it.
It's,
This is not going to change, like, do you need to apply or not? And that was the intention. It wasn't to say,
hardly ever, yeah.
yeah, the intention was not to be like, oh, before you did not have to apply for a permit, now you do. It's like, okay, you're doing something here. It's gonna change perhaps what you want to do, not say you can't do it now. That's not what we're looking to do. We're in most cases.
Or,
But it's just gonna-
or how
How.
you do it, how you do it, right?
Yeah.
Not what, but how.
Exactly. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay.
That's a much better way of saying it, Brad.
I'm good. I'm good. More discussion is gonna mean more questions by me, and I'm out of questions tonight.
Okay.
All right. Mary or Dan, do you just want to share your motivation for any of this, or do you want to turn and, spend 10 minutes asking the audience if they've got any feedback? You're muted, Dan.
Yeah. Just like to add, one of the things that motivated me is we have this informal, in inland areas, an informal policy that there's a 25-foot no disturb, 50-foot no build. That's a very common thing that's in the regulations associated with other towns' bylaws, and it seems perfectly reasonable. Right now, we don't, we can't enforce it. We can recommend it, ask for it. I think that's where the bylaw, I think, was most important to me. Again, it's providing clarity for the applicant and, sort of setting a common standard for every project.
Right. And so just to that point, a policy, right, Brad, if we denied a project based on a policy, we'd lose every time.
Mhm.
And so policy is basically a formalized, please, ask nicely, thank yous, but it has no real
No teeth.
standing.
Yep.
Right.
Understood.
And I would just say that a lot of my motivation comes from my background as a consultant and representing hundreds of people who are trying to go through this process and understanding how much easier it is for them and for me if there's clarity on what can and can't be done ahead of time, before you start drawing up plans and spending money, to know and have some kind of assurance what it is that's likely to be approved. And if there isn't, for example, established setbacks, then you're kind of just throwing a dart against the wall, not really sure what you're going to get, what's going to be approved. So this does provide, or the part of the motivation is to provide, yes, better protection for some wetland resources, but also much better information and clarity for homeowners. So.
Roger that.
Okay, well then in that case, let's open this up to, we got Steve, Dave, and Carol sitting on the line.
And just a reminder
so-
for everybody, nothing
Yeah.
new. Questions about how we
Exactly.
got here in the process, but we're not talking about what should be done. We would encourage anybody to show up to more meetings, to write emails to Sam with lists of questions or a question, whatever it is, so we can get to them. We want to interface, but tonight is just about because of the way it was noticed and the way we're doing this. It's just about what has happened, not what is going to happen.
Right, exactly. The purpose of this was, Brad, Frank, and Sam, getting them up to speed so that they could engage with this with us and be on equal footing and know what's come before. That was the real heart and soul of getting this meeting done.
And I
So,
appreciate you
um,
folks pulling that together. Thank you.
I appreciate you, asking questions. We're not gonna get any progress if we don't get the question. So yeah, let's let these guys in and see what they have to say.
Steve has his hand up.
Steve, is you muted?
Nope, he's all set.
Okay.
Hi, Mr. Chair, I appreciate the ability to comment, but I also apologize for coming in late. So my only comment at this point is that I previously submitted some material through Sam to you all. And if any of that deserves further consideration, I leave that on the table. But since I came in late, I'm not sure what's appropriate and not appropriate. So I'll leave it to you and Sam to raise any of the questions I raised, if they are appropriate. And I realize they may not be, given what Ben was just saying. And I think I'll leave it at that, and I'll try and be more on time in future deliberations by the Conservation Commission. So I defer to Sam and to the chair about if anything that I submitted already deserves further conversation. And I'm going to lower my hand.
All right. Thanks, Steve. So I saw your email. Sam did pass it around. And to just repeat something that was said earlier, the goal here that we're really looking to do not just is not to create new regulations for the island, but we're just not touching the Plum Island part of the existing bylaw, even to the point of not correcting typos in the existing law, because that would just open up a whole can of worms of having higher powers coming down and telling us that we can't do the part we're trying to accomplish. And so any interaction with the Plum Island aspect of the law is a different conversation for a different day, for a different process. And so we're just staying out of it.
Yeah, and I'd add, Steve, that your questions were good. We have them in the folder with all the bylaw stuff, and we will definitely get to them as we move forward, because they're great questions. Thank you for submitting them. We appreciate it. They're just not questions for tonight. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, it does. And I say thank you again, and I'll go back to being muted.
Thank you, sir.
All right. So then, David and Carol, anything on your minds?
David.
Yeah.
Yes, hello, thank you, guys. On number 12 and 13, the bullet on the page 2 there, could somebody explain those to me, please? 12 and 13. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yep.
Yeah, it's coming in ago.
Okay.
Where are we at? These
It's
ones
about-
here, David?
Yeah, the rare species and the vernal pool habitat.
Yeah. So I'll take that one. So when we do project reviews, and we've got one at the moment where this has happened, where vernal pools and rare species get protection regardless, right? And so
Right.
a lot of projects are going to come in and say, oh, they're not mapped. It's not on the map, therefore they must have looked for them and not found them. We're going to bring a project in and presume that those things aren't there. And so by doing it this way, we're hoping that we can sort of be forward and say, hey, even if it's not mapped, you may well have a rare species or you may well have vernal pool habitat. And so those processes that are going to be put forward regardless, we're just being upfront about it. If we were to delete those, functionally nothing would actually change. It just, it would make everything more complicated, more confusing. We'd still end up, talking about rare habitat and vernal pools, as appropriate. We just, it would be more confusing and a pain, basically,
Right.
for everybody.
Okay, so I guess my question is, who would, in the town of Newbury, determine what species are on that, in that area? In the vernal pool, because doesn't that group do it already? The NHESP? I mean, isn't that a big group that does studies and they have dedicated people to that field? So who and what group in Newbury would be determining what rare species there are?
If
And what
if I could
vernal
take that
pools,
one,
you know?
Brian.
Go for
Yeah.
it.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dave, you're correct that their natural heritage program identifies certifies vernal pools that have been submitted to them for certification. It doesn't
Yep.
mean that they have a complete list of all vernal pools in any area. So they've only certified ones that have been submitted. And they only know of rare plants and animal species based on data that's been submitted to them. So it is possible that a project would be come before us where either the applicant's representative, or upon site inspection by the Conservation Commission, some of these species might be observed. And in that case, we could provide the necessary protection for them through our decision-making, regardless of whether or not the Natural Heritage Program has them mapped and identified. Does that make sense?
Not really.
So
'Cause I thought
Dave,
that is their job to do, and I don't see how the Conservation Committee can determine, you know, what species are what. I mean, I don't know what background you need to determine that. I mean,
Yeah,
I would think
if we had
natural
reason,
heritage-
if we had reason to suspect that those things occurred on a particular site, it'd be up to the applicant to, to provide that documentation through, typically they have a wetland consultant working for them already anyway, and that person can either do that work themselves or refer to someone with that experience. So,
and to be clear about natural heritage and endangered species, it's not like they have a massive field staff that's going around, as Mary's saying, they don't have a field staff that goes around and catalogs things. They rely on processes of people being, whether they're wetlands professionals or avid bird watchers or, herpetologists who just have a big passion for it, to say, hey, I was in this pool and I found a marbled salamander or a Jefferson salamander, and they'll send a picture in. And then
Oh.
the 5 people who work in Westboro on this say, yep, that's a Jefferson salamander. We're going to add it to this database and map it under our rare species. That's how the process works right now. It's not like they go around cataloging everything.
yeah, so we're not
Alrighty.
going to be looking around at every property for rare plants and or vernal pool habitat. It just is, if it comes up during the process of either our review of the project or from a neighbor or a butter or someone who provides documentation that those things might exist, and we have the ability to regulate it regardless of whether or not Natural Heritage has that documented.
I did go, obviously you guys know what I'm trying to do out in the wetlands, but I did go through Natural Heritage. I paid my $300 for having them determine there wasn't an endangered species on my property. So I guess I'm taking their word on it.
Right.
So
And that we would be
just
satisfied
hope
with
this
that
wouldn't
determination.
counteract their decision, which it sounds like possibly it could.
Not unless, I mean,
they already did that.
if they've already done a review, then we
So I
would
started my process back
do that. Yeah.
in the beginning of February 2020.
Yeah, David, your
I think
your
that's all.
connection is not very good, so you're coming through pretty garbled.
Oh, okay. That's all I got for tonight. Thank you, guys. Did you hear that?
Yeah, it came
Thank
through. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Cool, thank you. So, any other, Carol want to kick in? No?
All right.
Okay. So then, with that,
Can I
anybody-
ask a
oh,
question?
yeah,
Hi,
where, yeah,
So, and this, it might it might be a little bit off topic because it doesn't necessarily, it relates to the bylaw, but it's not something that could necessarily be included in it because obviously like the bylaw doesn't develop regulations. It just allows for regulations to be developed. It opens that
Good.
opportunity up. So where like coastal management, where the
Here, Sam, let me
Very
interrupt. I think I know the answer. I think I know the answer before you finish the question. So the bylaw will create the opportunity for regulations. The way that regulations get created is in open meeting after it's posted, properly posted and notified. We have a conversation about a regulation and then we take a vote on whether or not to adopt it. And this could be one regulation at a time. This could be like 5 pages at a time. It depends on how the process gets put together. And so, if there's a regulation that, like I propose, right? Like I propose regulating solar panels on sheds, right? Like that doesn't mean it's going to get passed, right? And the idea of posting it and notifying appropriately is that we bring in arguably the affected community to have a say in the crafting and adopting of the regs.
so would that include even if say like the town, obviously the Plum Island where it's the barrier beach is mainly regulated under state regulations. We kind of follow the state regulations and what's written in the bylaw. But so say we wanted to, where like an RDA doesn't get a certificate of compliance. People don't have to do a certificate of compliance for an RDA, but we wanted to start implementing that as a policy. Would that affect or be affected by, not being able to change the bylaw where the barrier beach is concerned? I don't know if that makes any sense.
So the way the bylaw is written for the Plum Island bylaw right now, it incorporates the regulations into it.
Yeah.
The
It's an
bylaw and the
outlaw.
regulations are all together in one document. And so so the performance standards are all in there. What you can and can't do are already built into the document. One of the decisions that we all have to make as part of any bylaw change is whether we're going to do the same for the inland section and make those regulations, incorporate them into the document or reserve them for a later time. And that's one of the issues we'll need to get more public input on. But no, you can't, to your specific question, you can't just make a requirement that an RDA gets a certificate of compliance because that's inconsistent with the Wetland Protection Act. If we want to set up separate procedures, if we want to be specific that in ANRAD, for example, is an acceptable document under the bylaw, those are the kind of things that we would have to build in to the document itself as part of any procedural issues, they can be handled either as a regulation or they can be built into the bylaw itself that we're building.
And we had, in our previous attempt, opted to not have regulations within the bylaw. That was a decision we had made.
Yeah.
Yep. Well,
to which may be revisited. So
maybe it can be revisited, but
right.
There's.
Anyway, so Brad, are you hungry?
I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All right, roll call. Benjamin,
Aye.
Brad,
I
Dan. Dan's muted.
He said yes.
Mary,
Yes.
and I will also vote aye. So, great.
thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate it.
And yeah, hopefully that was helpful, Brad and Sam.
It was very much. Thanks all.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks, everybody. Good night.
Good night.